listening to Sudbury News Talk.
I want to show you something.
Stand by. On the morning shift.
Anything
could happen.
Sudbury News Talk on the morning shift.
All right, and good morning. Welcome to Sudbury News Talk on the morning shift. I'm AJ Walsh, Sudbury News and Views, where you get to share your views on our news right here on CKLU 96.7 FM, right here in Greater Sudbury, Ontario, Canada. Grateful for the opportunity to be here today, and thank you for being here with us as well. Each and every morning, or if it's your first time, welcome. Hopefully you like the show. Today will be a little bit interesting of a show. We'll get more into that later, but we're also streaming at cklu.ca. You can click on the Radio Player Canada app logo, stream us. You can also download the Radio Player Canada app, take us with you and listen to us anywhere, anytime on your favorite device. We are CKLU. We've been around since 1984, and we originally broadcast from the Laurentian University site in a little trailer. Now we're located in the old Telegraph building, all part of the new MacEwan School of Architecture under the umbrella of Laurentian University. And this show, Sudbury News, all of the views on it, whether it be mine or anybody commenting, are those of our views and no one else's. They do not necessarily reflect those of Laurentian University or that of CKLU. And we're also streaming at facebook.com/Sudbury News, youtube.com/Sudbury News in video format. And so to make sure to like, share, subscribe, follow our social media channels. That is our Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, even LinkedIn, for crying out loud. We really appreciate that. It gets the word out there, especially sharing the video and especially commenting, because this is your show. It's a service that we do each and every weekday morning, so that way people can stay connected on issues that are important to them, not only here in Greater Sudbury, but it seems like all over the world. So with that, welcome to all of you who are joining us from the various countries around the world. I very much appreciate you being here, whether you're from Sudbury or you've lived in Sudbury, or you're interested in what's going on here, or some of the stuff we talk about actually has implications in where you live as well, which a lot of times the content does. We're all citizens of the world, and things affect us in similar ways. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. Make sure to chime in and comment if you're on the live feed, and also afterwards you can still comment on the video. It still gets part of the comments, just it's not live. That's all. So thank you everyone for being with us, and thank you to our Facebook and YouTube moderators. You have a hard job to do as we try and keep our conversations real. Sometimes, when we're trying to be very honest and truthful, there's things that could possibly trigger other people, and sometimes when we're triggered, it's just because we have a knee-jerk reaction to something. And that's why this conversation is so important, to actually, massage out what we're really all about. And at the end of the day, we're all people. We're all trying to understand the world that we live in. It's very complicated, but together, that's our goal. We all have the same goals. We all want to have food to eat. We all want to be in a dry, safe, warm, or cool place, depending on where you are. Just a temperature where we can live, a climate where we can live in. And I'm talking about shelter, clothing, and then we want a nice community where we could branch out and have a great social life and have a community where it's prosperous and we all get along and we all have community standards, which you do have on your platforms, right? So, but when we're having these conversations, sometimes we could say things that seem preposterous, but at the same time, having a conversation is the greatest thing we could do to understand what's going on in our world as we take the news of the day and try and unpack it as good as we possibly can. And with different points of view as we have on the show. And that's not always one point of view, but today's going to be a little bit different. We're going to have a little bit of weather, a little bit of sports, some local news, and then we're going to unpack a little bit of maybe why the world is in the state that it is. I mentioned it a little bit yesterday, and of what's going on in our world and what's behind it. There's an ideology that's behind what's happening, and a lot of times we just see politics or we see news and we see different people, saying different things. We see different factions of our society getting upset and taking to the streets and all these things. And what's going on? I remember growing up and looking at the news in the Middle East, and I was going, what the heck's wrong with that place? They're always fighting. Well, fast forward, I'm 50 years old, and kind of seems like we're turning into a similar type of climate now. Stephen, yes, climate. I'm talking about the climate of our society, not the climate of the world, which is also something I'd love to talk about, and how that's been politicized and weaponized for political reasons, according to this ideology I'm going to be talking about today too. So what's behind all of this? Why is our world so crazy? And where is it coming from? And why do so many people, buy into certain things and whatever? And so it all starts in our education system, but it started before that, but it was implemented into our education system, and you could see, the results of it now, because it's been there for over 30 or 40, 50 years, slowly but surely coming into play. And we'll do our best anyways today to get through the show. So let's start off with a few of people chiming in. Good morning, Judy. Thanks for being with us today. Good morning, David. Stay safe as usual. Morning, Vin. Great to have you guys on. Denise, good morning. I'm here. Yes, I am too. Stephen, yes, a climate we can live in. And I'm sure you're alluding to the ice age / then global warming / then climate change issue of climate we could live in. That was kind of rolled out through science. We went through on the show a few last week or so, how that science has been changing very drastically in the short 30 years or so of what we can expect in the future. So we'll get to maybe why that's been so divisive of a subject. Belinda, good morning. Kindness trumps everything. Beautiful. And with that will be the phrase of the day for the show. Kindness trumps everything. Hopefully I'll be able to get back to that when we try and unpack of, maybe what's behind all of the chaos that our world faces. So not only Sudbury news, but try and dig a little deeper into what makes us a community of Sudbury, and also what makes us a community as a province or a state or a country. What makes a society, basically. And we'll do our best, in an hour-long community radio volunteer show, as much as we could do, where we have limited time and resources to get that point across. This is something humanity's been grappling with since the beginning of humanity, but we'll do our best on this show to talk about it. We'll be back with weather right after this. Sudbury weather brought to you by SudburyWeather.ca. 5 degrees, -5 degrees, feels like -12 out there today. Cloudy, becoming a mix of sun and cloud this afternoon. Wind west 20 kilometers, gusting to 40. Light this afternoon. Wind becoming 20 kilometers from the northwest late this afternoon. High of 8. Wind chill -12 this morning. UV index 5 or moderate. Tonight, partly cloudy. Wind of up to 15 kilometers, so it's very mild wind. Low of -4. Thursday, mainly sunny, increasing cloudiness in the morning. Then 60% chance of showers tomorrow afternoon. High of 6, wind chill -8 in the morning. UV index will be 4 or moderate. Again, Thursday, 60% chance of showers, high of 6. 60% chance of showers on Friday, high of 13. Saturday, periods of rain, high of 7. Sunday, chance of flurries or rain, 60%, high of 3. And then Monday, Tuesday, so far, very cool though, compared to what we had for those 3 or so days. Very hot summer-like weather here in the city. High of 5 and mix of sun and cloud for those 2 days, Monday and Tuesday. Look at your satellite over Northern Ontario. This is taken about 2 a.m. So whatever's transpired between then and now, it might have changed, but a lot of clouds, a lot of dark clouds, meaning precipitation for the the foreseeable future. And that is your Sudbury weather, brought to you by SudburyWeather.ca. We'll be back with some sports right after this. All right, and now the Sudbury Wolves playoff ended in the first round, and they were swept by the Peterborough Petes. Although their team showed a lot of promise, and it was very unfortunate that it ended that way. Such a young, promising team, and unfortunately in the OHL, you don't keep teams together all that long because it's there for their development to move on. And with that, a huge announcement that there's been 5 players announced from Sudbury, and that's Alex Ferron, Jabril Toure, Coach Adelic, Matthew Mania, and Quentin Musty, all listed in the 2023 NHL Central Scouting Final Rankings. There's only, I think, 2 or 3 other teams that have 5 players making that, and that would be London, the Flint Firebirds, and the Sudbury Wolves. So we're the only 3 that have 5 players in those rankings, to have 5 players make the 2023 Central NHL Scouting Rankings. So congratulations to those 5 Sudbury Wolf players. And unfortunately, I would hope that we could hang on to those players, have them, but it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. We'll have to have new blood coming up, and such as the OHL, such as the Sudbury Wolves. Our other professional team here in town, basketball, the Sudbury 5 will be back in action this weekend to take on the Jamestown Jackals, in back-to-back games. Saturday's game is scheduled for 7 p.m. tip-off, while Sunday's game is the usual 2 p.m. start. Now, that is interleague play, and I was doing a little deep dive into the NBLC, and they've really they had a lot more teams before the pandemic. Now they're down to only 4 teams in Ontario, unfortunately. The pandemic was really hard on the NBLC, but the American Basketball League, they have a lot more teams, and so you have the 2 leagues kind of facing off against each other and playing. And this is what this is, interleague play. We played last week against the team from Quebec, and now we're going to play the Jamestown Jackals. Get your tickets online at greatersudbury.ca/tickets for Friday and Saturday. We'll have more details on that. It's only Wednesday today, so Thursday, Friday, we'll give you more details on that. That's your Sudbury Sports, brought to you by Randy Pascal. He is that Sudbury Sports guy, and SudburySports.com is his website. Visit SudburySports.com for all things Sudbury Sports. We'll be back with headlines, a huge deep dive into our own humanity and maybe why we are the way we are these days. We'll be right back after this. Okay, and we are back. Trying to do something different on the show today with limited time, limited resources. But you know what? You only live once, or many, many times if you're Buddhist. So we're going to take our crack at it, and that's all we're going to do. Comments coming in. Let's see what we got going on here. This is a tropical planet. Both ice caps are synthetic. Oh, interesting. I knew a lot of this would be coming out here. A lot of theories going on around who we are, how we got here, what we're up to, where we came from, why we're here, where we're going, right? So this is what we're going to grapple with a little bit today, but we're not going to get all that deep into where we came from, where we're going. We are here now. What's going on? Who's in charge? What are they trying to mold our society into, and maybe why? So that's at least interesting, right? I truly believe we are a precipice. I hope I got that right. Of great change. We're on a precipice of great change. Evils. Many things have been exposed, and people are witnessing this. Yeah, we'll talk about that today for sure. Denise, good morning. Stay safe and healthy for sure. We will try. The chaos started with Trudeau. Well, we'll go even deeper than Trudeau, although Trudeau will be our segue into it. And unraveled with the truckers since then, it's become chaotic. LOL. So, yeah, we're going to, that's just the surface. That's just the scratching the surface. So why did all that happen? That's what we're going to try and dig deeper in today. Good morning, everyone. Monique, thanks for being with us, Monique. It's very true what you say about the OHL being a place for development. It's impressive that the five Wolves are on the scouting list for sure, as they were, as if they're headed to the playoffs. Yep. Yeah, they were out in the first round, unfortunately. But yeah, thank you, Stephen. It's for sure. It is a development league, and we kind of get attached to our team. Unlike the NHL, where a team can stay pretty much the same for years and years and years, our development league of the OHL and our Sudbury Wolves, it's a constant revolving door. We have some of these players only for 1 year. Julia, good morning. Thanks for being with us today. Let's see if I can get up on the screen some of your comments so I don't have to squint as much. And I want to be able to see them today, especially. Now, I'm going to try to get to your comments the best that I can. And as usual, as the show moves on, I have a harder and harder time to keep up. Exactly. Trudeau was a distraction for what is coming in the near future. Exactly. You're on the right track there. That's where we're going to get to a little bit more. He's just a piece of the puzzle, right? He's not the end of it all or whatever. He's just part of, and you can see this. And I know a lot of the people joining us from around the world are looking at their leaders in their countries, and they hear different things about the United States, Joe Biden's leadership, Great Britain, Netherlands, things that are going on there, Australia, China, Russia. It's a lot of the bigger nations that have a lot going on. They're also kind of getting our news too, to see that it's only a piece of the puzzle what's going on here on our way to a global society, right? And we'll see what ideology is behind that global society. 1971, good year, by the way. Trudeau passed a law. Credit for everyone. Yeah, mom got a wife. Oh, sorry. Mom got a visa, got drunken department. Okay. So that's a lot of acronyms, things in there. So you're able to read that. Unfortunately, with my eyesight, I am not so great with that. Yeah. 1971 was an interesting year. We had our own currency, and we went to the central bank. Morning from Espanola. Denise, thanks for being with us. So we went to the central banking system, which then we lost our kind of financial sovereignty, and everything since then we've been in debt to the central banks, like all other countries, except for maybe one or two left. I think North Korea might be the only one as a holdout. There might be a couple other ones. Seems to be the holdouts usually get invaded and taken over, and then afterwards they're part of the central banking system. That's how that kind of stuff works But yes, 1971, we lost our financial sovereignty for sure. The UN decriminalized sex with children, 10 years old and over, provided they consent and aren't paid. That's March 8th. So again, what's behind that kind of thinking? So if we just look at these things one off, all the crazy things. So if you made a list of all the crazy things going on in the world, and you're like, why, how does that happen? How could we let this happen? That's what we're going to try and look at today, the reasons why these things happen. Yes, sorry. Old Windows 7. Bad keyboard. Thanks, Denise. Appreciate that. So let's dive right in now. Some local news. So that way we have time for a bit of a deeper dive today into some of these deeper questions that we grapple with of why. That's what a good reporter should be doing, is looking into why, what's behind all of this stuff. Dig. Where, when, who, why, what, how, when, all the questions, the 5 W's and H. Sudbury City Council will be looking into a report this week that says snow removal this winter is $1 million over budget. What the heck? This winter was kind of weird. We had a lot of, snowstorms, but from what I saw, and from what I'm used to being here for most of my life, is that whenever there's snowstorms, there's people out there working on it, and I see less and less snow removal going on. It's kind of like they wait till it wait till it's all over and then they go out, is what I kind of see where I am. Now they do the main veins, main roads, but I don't know why we're $1 million over budget. It really doesn't make sense to me. So, and then Vin says, tax the tax. Do carbon taxes apply to municipal, provincial, or federal services? So pay for a service through taxes and then get an excess tax thrown on top of that. So yeah, I was going to share, I got so many things in the coffers to share. Representative of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation went to Ottawa and was being, trying to give a report on the carbon tax and how it's affecting Canadians in a really bad way. And, one of the Liberal MPs were saying, it's only a 2% extra tax. The corporations, the big bad blood-sucking corporations, put a 19% tax hike on their tax, but ours is only 2%. But she failed to recognize that it's 2% on top of the 19%. And as high as the corporations put it, they make more money. That 2% is higher on $100 than it is on $1. So the more the corporations put it up, the more government makes. And she also failed to say the 2% tax is already on tax. Gas is mostly tax. When they add the carbon tax on, it's tax on tax. That's where we're at, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to maybe ask ourselves why this is the way that it is. What's behind this? What kind of thinking goes behind this type of decision making? Public Service Alliance of Canada's 155,000 public servants say if a deal isn't reached by 9 p.m. last night, they're going to be striking. And guess what? Breaking news. As of 9 p.m. last night, they are striking. And if you want to look into more of how that impacts you, your tax return, you can just click on that story on our news feed at facebook.com/Sudbury News. It is the original story by Sudbury.com, or you could just go right to Sudbury.com and read that story if you want to see how that's going to impact you. But yeah, the CRA is on strike as of today. That is kind of huge news. Trudeau defends Jamaica trip, accuses Poilievre of struggling with the concept of friendship. $9,000 a night rooms in Jamaica at your expense. He would not answer if that was at taxpayers' expense or not, or how much of it he paid on his own. He basically just said that Pierre Poilievre doesn't understand that this is a friend of his, and they go back 50 years. Don't ask me if I paid for it myself or taxpayers paid for it. You don't understand friendship. That's that in a nutshell. We could watch the video. I would like to, but I'd like to do our deep dive more today. If you want to, you click on that story. It's from the Sudbury.com, SudburyStar.com, sorry. And you can just watch the exchange between Poilievre and Trudeau. Sometimes those are the funniest things, because our prime minister cannot just answer, or anyone from his government cannot just answer a question at all. And so Pierre Poilievre asks the question, and then you get just a rambling on of nonsense. And then you get Pierre Poilievre again saying, I will repeat the question again. And then you get a rambling on of the same stuff. And then he goes, I'm going to repeat the question because I did not get an answer. And it's true. Like, you just know, but you know, a non-answer is, basically it would have been on our dime. So $9,000 a night for his family after driving his private jet down there. He has a private jet that you pay for the gas. And how much carbon does that put into the air? He's gone on trip after trip after trip. We had the most delegates to the climate summit than any other nation on earth. We had the largest carbon footprint, but now we're going to make Canadians pay it, and Canadians contribute, so dismally to the climate, to the carbon of the planet. And news alert out there, trees need carbon. So if you look at Canada's tree population compared to its human population, we're already at a net zero or more. We're at a deficit in terms of carbon footprint. That's the news today from me. That's you heard it here first. A lot of trees, not that many people, and trees need carbon and they put out oxygen. And so take a drone and put it up over a satellite over Canada and count how many trees we got and vegetation. And the more carbon there is, the more vegetation grows, which then puts more oxygen out into the atmosphere. That's all I'm going to say on that. Not up for debate at this moment. It's not what we're here to talk about today. But look at this. Northern light enthusiasts got a surprise mix in with the green bands of light dancing in the Alaska skies. A light baby blue spiral resembling a galaxy appeared amid the aurora a few minutes. Look at that, eh? You see that every day, stuff like that in the sky, I guess. A big swirly thing right in front of the northern lights. And then here in Sudbury, Cape Real, we got like a donut in the sky, a cloud donut. Apparently, it's a normal thing according to Science North. It just happens when it's warm and there's a cold front coming in. Some air bounces off the clouds, off the hill, and makes a donut cloud. You must have seen that every time there is a weather change, right? Nothing to see here, just a donut cloud over Cape Real. Interesting stuff. There's a flood watch that's been turned into a warning. So Conservation Sudbury has issued a flood warning along the Vermilion River for parts of Dowling, Chelmsford, Whitefish, and Nairn Centre. The Watershed Stewardship Agency issued a flood warning over Lower Junction Creek near Mud Lake, Simon Lake, and McCharles Lake in the Naughton and Whitefish areas. If you are living around those areas, make sure to take as much precaution as you possibly can, because you could be flooded out. And with that, let's get into our deep dive today. Let's talk about Justin Trudeau, a little bit of what's going on with the whole Twitter thing, which again, I think is just a bit of a deflection of the deeper issues, which we will then get into right after this. So let's see where we're at here. What are we going to start with? Oh yeah, we're going to go here. Hopefully we got enough time, ladies and gents. Harrison Faulkner from True North is podcast ratioed. And yes, I do like his rants, and if it would be a possibility to be part of the show every day, he's able to pack in a lot into a short period of time, much better than I could. Okay, here you go.
Elon Musk just humiliated the CBC into oblivion yesterday, and to say the woke public broadcaster had it coming would be an understatement. You see, up until yesterday, there were a few things that all Canadians could agree on, but one pretty safe, uncontroversial fact is that the CBC is government funded. The CBC publicly state that every year in their financial report. The Liberal Party likes to brag about how much money they spend on the CBC, and Justin Trudeau himself, he likes to make jokes about giving the CBC more money in return for positive headlines.
You sometimes hear about liberal bias in the media these days, how they're constantly letting our government off the hook for no good reason. Frankly, I think that's insulting. It's clear that they let us off the hook for a very good reason, because we paid them $600 million.
But when Elon Musk slapped a government-funded media label on the CBC's Twitter account, well, all hell broke loose inside the Canadian establishment. Justin Trudeau, in typical fashion, attacked Pierre Poilievre for some reason. The CBC publicly declared their editorial independence before shutting down all of their Twitter accounts. And ministers of the Crown labeled the opposition leader a threat to Canadian democracy, all over a simple Twitter tag. In response to this, Twitter has made their government-funded media tag more clear under the CBC's page. It now reads 69% government-funded media. Honestly, does it get any better than that? Drop a like in the video, help us out by subscribing to the True North YouTube channel, and the comment question for the episode is this: is there any reason for the CBC to exist in Canada today? Let me know, and let's get into it. The CBC has no problem being labeled as government-funded on Wikipedia or on YouTube, but being labeled government-funded, being labeled what they are on Twitter, that was a step too far. Just take a look at how the woke propagandists at the CBC responded to being labeled as government-funded. Exactly what they are. Our journalism is impartial and independent. To suggest otherwise is untrue. That is why we are pausing our activities on Twitter. Oh yeah, the CBC is totally impartial, except for when their chief Ottawa correspondent sued the Conservatives in the 2019 election when they had to retract untrue stories about the Freedom Convoy, which conveniently helped the government crush the peaceful protest, and when they constantly demonized Conservatives. Except for that, they're totally impartial and totally independent. And doing what
Yeah, so we'll leave that there. And if you wanted to see more of that, it is Harrison Faulkner, Ray Shode, on True North. They are an independent media. The one that Justin Trudeau said that Pierre Poilievre basically was targeting. So Pierre Poilievre is targeting them. Can you imagine that? That he's targeting independent media? That's what Justin Trudeau said that Pierre Poilievre is doing. He's not just targeting the CBC, he's targeting Harrison Faulkner. So I don't know why he would do that, but he's targeting him and all local journalists, all Canadian journalists like him. Now, an outside view, whether you like it or leave it or whatever or love it, one of the more conservative personalities, Tucker Carlson in the United States, looking at Canada, and you can just see other points of view, right? So I'm basically showing another point of view from an outside source of how they view Canada. He's actually put together a documentary about Justin Trudeau and his form of government. And basically, yeah, so let's just watch this. We'll be right back after this.
Here, for more than 100 years, the United States has, as a matter of official policy, opposed dictatorships around the world. But what if tyranny arrived right next door? What would that look like? And what would our government do in response? Would we liberate the people living under authoritarian rule as we have around the world? That is the topic of our upcoming Tucker Carlson Originals documentary, Oh Canada. Here's a first look at what we found.
The cost of freedom is always high, but Americans have always paid it.
Some nations may be able to turn a blind eye to atrocities in other countries. The United States of America is different.
Fortunately for the oppressed, America's influence is considerable.
Roger, target mark by Isler.
Oh, mankind.
We like to say people kind.
Exactly.
All right.
The police then moved in and arrested me.
Bye, Daddy.
In the entire time that I was in prison,
They shot me point blank. My mouth, my nose, my eyes.
I received bruises, my hands were bleeding. You're placed under arrest right now.
I was arrested, handcuffed, and put in jail.
The greatest danger of all would be to do nothing.
We care about saving innocent lives.
The tyrant will soon be gone. The day of your liberation is near.
So it made us wonder, what exactly is going on in Canada? We sent our producers there for months. They made immediate contact with Lauren Southern, who is a Canadian and one of the best-known freedom fighters in that country. She joins us on set now. Lauren Southern, thank you so much for coming. I'm glad you're able to get out of Canada.
Barely.
I think most Americans are kind of unaware of what's happening in your country. How does it feel from within it?
Oh, it's
absolutely maddening. We've just in the past few years, we've had a large thousands of guns banned in the country. We've just found out that our elections were almost entirely rigged by the Chinese government. So that's new news just in the last week. And essentially, we've lost our right to protest. I'm sure everyone saw it during the truckers, but that has continued on. That has persisted. Canadians are living in a state of absolute fear of our government, and we're not even sure if our government is controlled in Canada or overseas.
Right, whether your democracy is real, and of course that's a familiar feeling to Americans. So the freedom of speech, the freedom of assembly, and the freedom to defend yourself, including against tyranny. The first two rights hang on the third. We interviewed you at some length in this documentary about the right to self-defense. I want to play part of it for our audience.
One of the saddest parts for me is, I've got handguns myself, and I will probably be one of the last Canadians to own them. Those guns will die with me and then go to the government. I don't get to hand them down, nothing.
He's banning firearms that in many cases are not even semi-automatic.
We've got a thin veneer of civilization here in Canada right now. And when that thin veneer of civility crashes, the government don't want a bunch of people with guns that can defend themselves and have their own communities out here in rural Canada. They want to be in control. This will always be home to me, but there's just a bunch of politicians trying to make it less and less like home every day.
Canada does not and has never had a violent crime problem that would justify disarming the population. This is purely an effort by the government to make certain no one can fight back.
Yeah, more people die from alcoholism in Canada than any sort of gun crime, but you don't see us banning alcohol.
Right.
Guns have a purpose, right? You can feed yourself. I actually have come into my driveway and had bears up in the trees. It's a real thing. It's a real problem. Meanwhile, we actually just legalized cocaine and hard drugs, MDMA, heroin, all the likes in my city of Vancouver. I guess we were having a work ethic problem with all the weed. They needed the cocaine legalized as well.
They legalized cocaine in Vancouver.
They've legalized cocaine in my city. You've got mushroom vending machines. If you walk down Hastings Street, now they're going to have shops where you can buy cocaine, but they've taken away guns. It seems they're legalizing all of the vices in my country while taking away all of the things that actually give people the ability to put their life in their own hands, have personal responsibility, take care of yourself. They want us drugged up. They want us pleasure-seeking. They want us completely, the opiate of the masses, dependent on the government, turning a blind eye to all of the corruption going on. They just want us pleased with things that will distract us.
So there you have the point of view there. It's Tucker Carlson. He is a personality on Fox News. Again, was talked about demonizing certain types of media over time. You can see that very much so from outlets like CBC, like yesterday when they went to court over the accusations that they were fueling the idea that there was corruption in the elections. The CBC that was one of the top stories yesterday. You can tell they were just frothing just to hope that something bad would happen to Fox News. You know what I mean? And that's the sense that I got from the story that I listened to. So what's behind all of this stuff that's going on in Canada and then around the world? So we're just looking at Canada first, but now let's do a little bit of deeper dive with a Canadian and also an American here. So Jordan Peterson, again, demonized in much of the liberal media world because of his point of view that he might say something different than that point of view, right? And so called all kinds of names. But let's just listen to him along with a fellow by the name of Dave Rubin talk about maybe some of the issues in our society, and then Jordan Peterson will take it from there over what was behind it and for all of this time leading to where we're at now.
Saying, if you don't understand history, you may very well repeat it. Why do we walk away from people we can trust warning us of the consequences?
Well, I think there's an interesting reason for that sort of brings the Solzhenitsyn story into 2019, which is that he was truly oppressed. This was a life of actual oppression, right? Now we have people that are walking around, everyone in this room has this in their pocket. And if you have this in your pocket and you
turned
think,
off, I hope.
Yeah, hopefully turned off. But if you have this thing in your pocket and you think you're oppressed, you're very confused. We live in a time with such absurd freedoms in the West that are so beyond imagination of what people could only dream of 2 generations ago, even 1 generation ago, especially with this, that people now have a perceived oppression instead of a real oppression. So one of the things that I find when I go to college campuses is that, you know, these kids will protest and they'll scream and that, you know, that everyone's alt-right and everyone's neo-Nazi and the rest of this. And I always find, all right, well, how do you break through to somebody like that? How do you actually, when they have, you know, you've talked about this, when they have that look in their eye, truly a possessed look, and they're, you know, it's this postmodern monster has become sort of a secular religion. And I think that's also one of the reasons why what Jordan's doing is resonating, because they've removed religion from the equation and now they have no meaning, and they put it all into this really competing set of ideas, what we call the oppression Olympics, where they're constantly competing for oppression because they believe that victimhood is virtue, and victimhood, of course, is not virtue. What's virtuous is getting your life in order and going out and doing something. So I'm always looking for a little trick to get through to these kids, and it's really hard because when they have that sort of glossed over zombie look, it's tough. And I found one trick that actually kind of works if you can get it to them in the most simple, personal way. And this particularly works in the United States, and I have no doubt that it would work here in Australia as well. I'll say to them, anyone in this room, does anyone in this room have it worse than their grandparents? Now, I've done this, I don't know, 100 times probably. Nobody has ever raised their hand. Nobody ever. If you live in the United States, you basically, I mean, the only outsider case would be if your grandparents were oil barons or something like that, and then they lost all the money, in which case the leftists would actually love that too, because it would show that, well, it would show that accumulated wealth doesn't stay beyond generations, so they're all about that, right? So, but if you can do something like that, I mean, if you say, I mean, everyone in this room can do it. Like, can everyone picture their grandparents? Do you have it better or worse? I mean, does anyone in here have it worse than their grandparents? And that shows you that it's a perceived oppression, not a real oppression, that the thing that they're fighting, this patriarchal, postmodern, capitalistic thing that they're fighting, I mean, they can't define it, so it's hard to define it for them, that it actually has bent toward justice always. Always. And if you can plant that seed in them, I think it's a little bit of something. But it's very hard to break them out of that. But I think the key here is understanding that it's a perceived oppression. If you live in a free society in the West in 2019, you're not oppressed. You maybe don't have it as well as your neighbor does, and maybe you came from more and they came from less, or maybe you're sick and they're not, or a series of other things. But you've got a chance. And that's all you're supposed to have in life. And I think getting that through to them, as opposed to, oh, the system is horrible and I have to now destroy the system, as if they could magically reconstitute a system that really would just be, in effect, throwing away thousands of years of human history, that they're so wise. They're so wise at 24 years old as they're shouting down speakers that they could build up what nobody before them could. And that's the danger there. So I think getting them to think about their own lives, where they come from, I think is a pretty effective way of getting through to people.
Well, we could also say, like, look, there's a claim that the West is an oppressive patriarchy. And so that's actually true. The problem with the claim is that it's not just an oppressive patriarchy. And there's a big difference between something being completely something and something being partly something. Because one of the things you might point out is that you can look at human history anywhere, and what you see is a complete bloody nightmare, right? It's death and struggle and privation and war and horror everywhere, with some progress, you know, some ability of us to pull ourselves out of the mire, you know, and the West is the same. There's plenty of catastrophe in our past, and of all sorts. And I think it's necessary to know that. But then it's necessary to separate the wheat from the chaff. You know, one of the things I see with readers who are unsophisticated and intellectually arrogant is they'll read someone great. Maybe they'll read Nietzsche, for example, and they'll find the odd thing that Nietzsche said that grates against their current moral sensibilities, whether they do that in context or out. And then they'll throw away the whole book. It's like, you don't throw away the whole book. It was Nietzsche. You don't throw away the book. He's like 1 in a billion. You read it carefully and you think, well, okay, no to that. But yes to this. And you do the same thing with Dostoevsky, and you do the same thing with Tolstoy. You do the same thing with the great writers of the past that have been passed down to us. You read intelligently. You separate the wheat from the chaff, right? And you gain wisdom that way. Well, you do the same when you look at your own history. It's like, well, of course it's a bloody nightmare. What do you expect? It's like, what's your point? We're going to burn it down and then we're going to have something better as a consequence? Well, not so easily, not so quickly. Maybe we read our history carefully and we think, okay, well, what did we get right? Well, what did we get right? Well, the sovereignty of the individual, that's pretty good. The fact that you have right to property, that's pretty good. You can argue about the limits on that, but you don't want someone just taking your purse. It's helpful that there are things that you can earn and own. The dignity of the individual, that's another one. The innocence before the law, God, that's a miracle that we ever came up with that idea. I can't believe that idea exists, because in most cultures it's like, well, you might be guilty, okay, you're dead. Because, well, that's easier, you might be guilty. Why go through all the trouble? There's plenty of people where you came from. It's like the trouble of presuming your innocence. It's innocent. It's even hard for you to do that for yourself. And the idea that each person has an intrinsic worth regardless of their, externalities, let's say. That's another idea that's a complete miracle. It's like, what are we going to do? We're going to throw all that away with the statement that we live in an oppressive patriarchy. And then we're going to be left with nothing. And what good is that? Well, how about we look at our history and we take responsibility for it? We think, okay, well, here's some things that need to be fixed. There's plenty of them, right? There's plenty of them for each of us to fix. And we'll go fix them. And maybe then we can atone for the bloodiness of our history and for our so-called unearned privilege, some of which all of us have. And that would be good. That would be part of the adventure of your life too. And that's a far more sensible and wise approach to the diagnosis of what's wrong with the West than, well, it's an oppressive patriarchy and it should be overthrown, or whatever that current low resolution and resentful ideology happens to be. And there's something to be said for a bit of humility as well. Mm-hmm. It's like, really, you really think that you're capable of making large-scale social transformations and getting it right, do you? You really think that? You're 25, you're 30, you're 40, I don't care, What makes you think you're smart enough to pull off something like that? It's very, very difficult, very, very, very difficult to take a system that works not too badly and to do anything to it that doesn't make it worse, much less to radically reconstitute it and make it better. That's really hard. So, if you're upset about your culture, well, maybe you could think of some small ways that are local that you could go out and improve it. I think you should start with yourself, because, then you're only harming yourself and you're not a bad person to practice on. And then you could extend that to your family. Well, at least you suffer for the consequences of your own experiments that way, rather than having someone else do it. And then maybe you can work on bringing a little more harmony into your family. And maybe you can get a job and see if you're any good at that. And then if you manage those three things halfways respectably, well, then you could dare to put a toehold out into the broader community and think, maybe I have an idea here that we could tentatively attempt that might make some small thing slightly better that we could measure carefully and assess.
There you go. Jordan Peterson, no one says it better than him. And with that, I'll give him a lecture that he gave at a university about where this ideology came from and how harmful it is to our society. And for the last 50 or so years, that's what's been kind of woven through the fabric of our society. This video was also taken in 2019, so that was 4 years ago. before the pandemic, where Jordan Peterson was talking, but the comments he's going to be making in this lecture at university are just timeless anyways. And so who can say it better than Jordan Peterson? Where does all this victim mentality and burn it all down and the society's the worst we've ever seen come from? Anyways, and let's just chime in here.
So the universities have figured out how to conspire in some sense to pick the future pockets of the students that they're purporting to educate, and they're not educating them, they're indoctrinating them. They're not teaching them how to speak, they're not teaching them how to debate, they're not teaching them how to write, they're not introducing them to the classical wisdom of the Western Judeo-Christian tradition. And that's absolutely appalling, because that's what the bloody institution was there for to begin with, and that's what it's supposed to be doing. Yeah, so what else do I have to tell you about that? Oh yes, I just have one more thing. I guess that one of the things that was quite curious about was, I'll tell you about two things. One of the things I was quite curious about is the postmodern, say neo-Marxist insistence that the only true human motivation is power. Now, I've been thinking about that in a couple of ways. I think that was actually Marxist sleight of hand at the end of the 1960s, because the original Marxist revolutionary doctrine was that Western society, let's say capitalist society, but you can think about it more broadly as society in general, is basically best conceptualized as a zero-sum game fought to the death between the oppressors and the oppressed, and be the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, let's say. And you know, as we know, playing that game in places like the Soviet Union and Maoist China didn't work out so well for everyone, so there seemed to be a fundamental flaw in the conceptualization, although people could always excuse that by saying, well, that's not real communism, which is the sort of statement that should immediately get you punched in the nose hard enough to knock you out, as far as I'm concerned. So because the statement like that reveals only one thing, and what it reveals is that if you had been fortunate enough to be in the position of Joseph Stalin, that you wouldn't have been quite the murderous monster that he was, because your moral character is such that you wouldn't have been swayed by access to that kind of extreme power. And if you dare to make that claim, then there's some things about yourself and humanity that you should learn, and you should learn them rapidly before you pose more of a danger to yourself and others than you already pose. So part of it is, the postmodernists turned the Marxist emphasis on economics into an emphasis on power in the 1970s, and I think they did that as a form of sleight of hand, because by the late 1960s and early 1970s, it was obvious even to people as intransigent as say Jean-Paul Sartre, who refused to denounce the Communist Party until that late in the progression of the 20th century. It became obvious even to people like that there was just no way that you could maintain your intellectual and moral credibility and remain a supporter of standard communist doctrine. And also it seemed to be the case that, strangely enough, contrary to Marx's prediction, that the working class in the West was getting richer, and richer than people had ever got in history, rather than being increasingly downtrodden by the brute heel of the corporate and capitalist elite. So it was not a revolution that was particularly easy to sell. Part of the sleight of hand was, oh, it's not about economic power, it's about oppression and oppressed and oppressor on a broader sense, and that's where we got the transformation into identity politics, which is just the Marxist oppressor-oppressed doctrine under a new guise. And I think it's really tremendously reprehensible for people to be conducting themselves intellectually in a manner that insists that the most important element of any student, or any person for that matter, is whatever racial, gender, and sex identity happens to be flavor of the month. And I think the problem with that fundamentally is, first of all, that those category systems are extraordinarily loose, and they're indefinitely multipliable, you know, because if you take any given individual, there's probably, well, it's the postmodern problem, haha, there we go, it's the postmodern problem, that there's almost an infinite number of ways to categorize any given individual. So how the hell do you figure out which group they belong to? And that's actually a major problem. Like, if you're 1/8 black, what does that make you exactly? Are you black? Are you white? Are you oppressed? Are you oppressor? Are you let's see, 1/2 as oppressed as someone who's 1/4 black? Does it work out arithmetically that way? Hey, I'm dead serious about this, man. If we're going to play this sort of game, that's exactly the question that has to be asked, right? And then how do you multiply up your oppressed identities? And then again, who gets to decide exactly which identity you should manifest? And then how do we rank order those identities? And then how do we equate between them? And what measurement techniques do we use to determine who's oppressed and who isn't? And how do we assess equality? And on what dimensions are we going to assess equality? And who's going to enforce it? And who's going to make the decisions? It's like, oh well, we'll figure that out as we go along. It's like, yeah, we certainly will, and the results won't be pretty, I can tell you that, because the problem is actually unsolvable. All it'll mean is that those categories will be made at the whim of the people who are making the categories. And since, as we know, the only thing they believe in is power, that the only thing they believe in is power, is that you can be absolutely sure that they will have absolutely no hesitancy whatsoever to use power in the seeking of their aims. And I think the other reason that all of the postmodernists, neo-Marxists ever do is talk about power is because they want to justify their use of power to get exactly what they want when they want it. There's nothing but power. It's like, all right, if there's nothing but power, that means we're at war over power. And that, if that's the claim that you make, then you can justify the use of power because there isn't anything else to turn to. There's no logic, there's no dialogue, there's no consensus, there's no discussion between well-meaning people. There's nothing but divisions between power groups and identity groups and a Hobbesian state of war between all of us. Well, when I look at people aiming at that, then my proclivity as a psychoanalyst is to think that that's exactly what they want. And to divide us up all by race and ethnicity and sexual identity and sexual preference and sexual expression and gender identity and all these multiplying forces of group identity seems to be nothing but an invitation to chaos, and that's exactly what I see looming. And it needs to come to a stop, and it needs to come to a stop as fast as possible. And one way of doing that is to stop the universities from continuing to indoctrinate young people who really, at least at the beginning, don't know any better into playing these absolutely insane and I would say bordering on murderous intellectual games. And so...
And that's it. Jordan Peterson. I just graduated recently, 2021, from Laurentian University, just before during the bankruptcy, actually. I thought I would never get that degree, but luckily I just made it out, the skin of my teeth, totally taught. My first class was, today we're going to learn about Marxism and why we need to understand that. And then every single scholar had to be a Marxist scholar. It couldn't be a Christian scholar or a Jewish scholar or Muslim scholar or anything. Had to be a Marxist. It could be, one of those other identities with Marxist, but had to be a Marxist scholar, which had meant that that's the ideology that Jordan Peterson just explained. We know every single thing that's going on in our world comes ultimately from that ideology. I just wanted to share that. I needed to get that across at some point on one show or another because I experienced it myself very recently. And it does need to be stopped being taught in universities. It's basically, I thought the Church of Marxism is what I called it. We'll be back same time, same place tomorrow. Thanks everyone for joining us, and see you then. Stay tuned now for Earshot Daily on CKLU 96.7 FM. Ciao.
This is Sudbury News Talk on the morning shift.